Yo, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another video. This is like the third fucking time that I've tried to record this video. Anyways, this video should be good now. But today we're talking about acoustic guitars, as you can see by the title or whatever the hell I decided to name this. And yeah, I'm working on this beat right now that I'm making. It's a splice loop. So, it's not the greatest acoustic guitar, but the main thing that there's not a lot of artifacts in it, so I think it'll still be like a helpful video, and it's still a pretty good quality acoustic guitar loop thing, whatever you want to call it. So let me play the track, and then we'll kind of break down and talk about what I'm going for and the kinds of things that I personally do when I'm trying to make an acoustic guitar sound like an acoustic guitar as best as I can. So here we go. So, sounds like an acoustic guitar, and I've been saying acoustic guitar a lot in this video, so let's see how many times I'm going to say it throughout this video. The first thing I want to talk about is that I'm adding heat, so that's a built-in console emulation to it, and I think it plays like a super important and big part to this. So also, if you're hearing the static, that is not at my microphone, besides the refrigerator in my background. That is the static from one of these keyboards that I'm using, these synths, and can't turn the noise off. So the first thing I'm going to do is let's bypass, not that's mine. Let's bypass these plugins. So I have an API channel, I have an LA2A, and I have the super plate. So let's bypass heat, and then I'm going to turn it on, and then you'll, hopefully hear what I'm hearing. So why I like heat, it's super easy to use. In my opinion, when I'm thinking about any kind of saturation, or specifically when it's supposed to be quote unquote console sounding saturation or distortion or summing, whatever the hell you want to call it. What I'm hearing and what I like about heat is that it also is just adding a little bit of, I want to say, like character or depth when I'm adding heat to any kind of source. And especially with this acoustic guitar, you can hear that bottom end come up a little bit, you can hear the string noise come up a little bit, and it just adds a little bit more vibe and just sounds a little bit more, I don't know if you want to say like realistic, in my opinion. So yeah, let me play it one more time and hopefully you can hear those things. But that's definitely what I'm hearing, and that's what I always try to listen for when I'm applying the amount of heat that I want to apply, or we'll call it saturation. So yeah, you can really hear, that bottom end come up a little bit. The mid-range is definitely slightly more present. And like I said, with that mid-range becoming a little bit more present, that's why we're hearing that, string noise or the strumming just a little bit more clarity, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So let's switch back to the edit window and let's bring up the API. With the API, doing some filtering, doing some compression, and obviously doing some EQ. So I'm going to throw it on halfway and let's hear what this is doing, and I'll explain. So, before we even threw the API into the mix, you already thought that, it was a okay sounding guitar, but now when we bypass the API or add it and then bypass it, there's like a huge difference. Obviously, EQ is doing a lot. In general, EQ is definitely going to be your tone shaping, tool, obviously, compared to everything else. And we're definitely doing some tone shaping. We're adding a little bit of sparkle with that 20K. I did 20K. I do like 15, 12, but for me, especially when it's like an acoustic guitar, I just think the acoustic guitar is like a really, beautiful sounding instrument, the way it produces sound or whatever, and just in general as an instrument. And I think treating the top end of an acoustic guitar is probably the most important part, and obviously the body and stuff. It's all important, but I just think that's where you can really make an acoustic sound and feel, I don't know, expensive, I guess, is what is the thought process that I'm always trying to have when I'm EQing or mixing an acoustic guitar. So we're adding 20K. I specifically chose 20K just because the way that EQ works, obviously, and specifically with the 550, and it depends on which one you're using. If you're using the 550 or the 560, they in a way work similar, but they're definitely doing two different things when you're boosting or cutting the way that the curves work on this EQ. What I'm hearing and what I'm hopefully is happening is that by me boosting 20K, hopefully it's bringing up, maybe touching 7K, maybe not. Definitely probably touching 20 and 15, obviously. So I'm assuming and hopefully like hearing that these frequencies are coming up as well, instead of me just choosing one of these frequencies, because these can be a little bit too brittle sounding, a little bit too harsh. And like I said, I'm going for more of a sparkle than I am like an airy, bright sound. And then next we have a little bit of 5K. I personally do like 5K. I'm mixing on some Oratone style speakers. So, they're like super limited, band limited speakers. So not going to have any high end really, and not going to have any low end. It's just all mid range. And I think with 5K, I think it's such a important and special frequency. I think that if you can get your 5K and 8K, 3K, whatever, that upper mid range to sound good on a limited speaker, most of the time it's going to sound good everywhere. So it's also a way of, understanding when it's too much and when it's not enough, because there is a lot of character in that frequency range, in my opinion. So that's why I chose 5K. And like I said, specifically with an acoustic guitar, I just think that that can bring up a little bit of, that string noise to make it sound a little bit more real. And obviously, like I said, this is all going to depend on the playing and the style too, and the player itself. So if there's too much, maybe it's a way to, take some of that string noise out. But if it's a good recording and it sounds good and it works with the actual track, then maybe it's a good way of adding it. So 500 is a tricky frequency because obviously we associate it with like, I don't know, like honkiness, low, mid, mud, or whatever. But sometimes for vocals, acoustic guitars, and electric guitars, and, depending on the style, if you can get that frequency to work, you're going to have a much more fuller sounding signal than you trying to add it somewhere else or removing it or whatever. So I always try to just add it or try to keep it intact, but it's hard, it's tough. But so instead what I did is that I cut out 500 and then I went and added 200. For some reason, however, wherever they recorded, that 200 sounded really nice, and I'll show you an example of it. So let me play it, and I'm going to boost it all the way to 12 dB, and you're going to hear what I mean. So obviously 4 dB is definitely going to be the sweet spot for this specific recording of the guitar. With 12 dB, it didn't sound terrible. It sounded cool, I guess is what I'm trying to say, but obviously not going to fit the vibe. 4 dB is the sweet spot. When I remove that frequency in general or just keep it at 0, just the guitar just sounded like super thin and flat. So that's what I'm saying. There can be a lot of body in these lower frequencies if you just know how to shape your lower mids and stuff like that. Typically with certain stuff. So the main thing also that I'm hearing besides body is that those low strings, I can hear the strum just a little bit better, and it kind of just sounds a little bit more round. So hopefully that makes sense. And obviously you can hear that I'm doing a lot of compression. I wouldn't say a lot, but a little heavy-handed on the compression. Like I said, this is gonna make sense with the track because that's what I'm going for, and I'm also just getting a little bit more energy. So let me play it, and I'm going to play it with the track because I think that's where you're going to hear it the most. So, you know, obviously you can hear that there's definitely some loss and gain, and it's similar. It reminds me of the SSL compressor that's built into the channel strips or the console itself, where there's a little bit of auto gain going on. This one definitely, the 225 is definitely a little bit more, can be a little bit more aggressive when you push it compared to the SSL, but they're very similar, and I think that's why I like the 225. So with this, I just wanted a little bit more energy out of it. I wanted to get all the frequencies that I decided to keep in the acoustic guitar to kind of come up and be a little bit molded together. And I think compression can do that. It can be some sort of EQ control in itself if you know what you're wanting to do with a compressor. Specifically, it's gonna obviously affect that low end a little bit more compared to the rest of the frequencies in a signal. So I think it's just kind of bringing up that bottom end closer to the mid range and just the rest of the guitar itself. So that's kind of what I was going for. And as I was pushing the compressor, I just remember being like, oh yeah, this sounds like that bottom end's coming up a little bit. And obviously the compression's just squeezing the signal together just a little bit more than it would if it wasn't on there. And otherwise, I mean, the heavy compression or heavier compression, just adding a little bit more energy, and who doesn't like a little bit more energy in their tracks. So that's why I like that. And then you can see that I have a filter at 100. Nothing new there. The next thing is this LA2A. I'm just going to go ahead and play it, and then we'll talk about it just so you can, because I think this one is the more obvious one. So similar to the 225, where it definitely disappears in the track. Obviously, there's a little bit of gain going on as well, but kind of the same thing. It's adding energy. It's just fitting in the track a little bit more. This isn't a fully recorded song yet, so these things could change. But for what it is, and at the moment, and where this track is right now, it's helping that acoustic kind of have its own spot within the track and not getting in the way of the bass, not getting in the way of the snare and kick. So also same thing. It's just adding some energy that wasn't there before. And like I said, who doesn't like energy? So yeah, it's just like one of those things where it's just like if it's soloed, you can hear that there's a little bit more compression going on than maybe what you would like on acoustic guitar. But for this specific style that I'm going for and this track itself, when I play it together, like you don't really hear or think about like, oh, this acoustic's just a little bit too compressed. Like it's just right on the edge. And I think it just doesn't matter if it fits in the track and it helps fit in the track, and that's the vibe you're going for, then you'll never be doing the wrong thing. And then this last thing I'll talk about is the super plate. This specifically, this is kind of more of a, I don't even know how to explain it, because I'm not, obviously when you're trying to add reverb to things, you want to add reverb to things. You want to put things in a space. That's why these things are there. That's why these tools were made, because you're trying to put sources in a space. Obviously with like music and modern music, it's a little bit more creative, like with reverb throws and just making things sound, more atmosphere or whatever. It's more of a creative thing than maybe what it was used in the past. But with this, I was just like, I just want to put this acoustic in a specific room itself, like, because it was, like I said, not the best recording, but not the worst. I was like, I just need something to kind of match that vibe. And what if I can make this guitar sound like it was recorded, I don't know, in some sort of like cafeteria or like building, some weird thin sounding building. And I think with the super plate, I pretty much got that right away without really even trying. I kind of just was flipping through it, and by accident was just like, oh, this actually sounds exactly what I was hearing in my head. So let me play it. So yeah, you can hear it's definitely not like the prettiest sounding type of reverb, but it sounds really cool. And it's exactly what I said. It just sounds very like metally, like, you know, you're in like a really long, weird, shitty hallway. And that's kind of what I was going for. Obviously, when I was exaggerating, you can hear what it's sounding like. But without it, it just sounds like just thin and awkward. And I think with the reverb, you're adding just a little bit of room around it and kind of putting the acoustic in this weird little room, but it works. You can see that I have my tail pretty long, but because this is such, I don't know, like a metally thin sounding reverb, you just don't really hear, and it doesn't get in the way of anything else. It doesn't get in the way of the transients of the acoustic. It kind of just works with it. And obviously, that's also helpful with the mix knob. And yeah, I mean, that's pretty much it. It just works. So, you know, shout out to Sound Toy, shout out to Superplate. This is like a really interesting find that I kind of stumbled across. And, you know, I didn't change anything else. Everything even here. Just didn't mess with anything. Just a little bit of mix knob, trying to find the perfect reverb that's going to match it, and then also just adjusting how long and, you know, how big I want the reverb to sound. So let me play it one more time, because I think this is probably my favorite part of the whole video, or like the whole mixing process, is this reverb. So yeah, I don't know. It's maybe it's too subtle, but this is more of like just a creative advance, like more of like a feeling type of thing than it is really a mixing tip or whatever. Yeah, I just think it needs it. I think without it, it sounds good, but this just kind of took it just a, you know, an extra 10%. Like, okay, cool. Now there's some character with this acoustic guitar. But yeah, hopefully that makes sense. Hopefully this all makes sense. If anything didn't make sense, please let me know in the comments why, and, you know, maybe I'll make another video on it, or I can explain a little bit better. It's hard to kind of recreate what you're thinking like in real time or whatever, because mixing is just, you just kind of set it and forget it, and then cross your fingers that it sounds good. But anyways, if you made it this far in the video, I appreciate it. Hopefully this was helpful. And like, share, subscribe. We're almost halfway to 2,000 subscribers. And yeah, so I'll see you on the next video. Peace.